Run your law firm the right way. This is the Maximum Lawyer Podcast. Your hosts, Jim Hacking and Tyson Mutrux. Let's partner up and maximize your firm. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's Tyson, and today I'm talking about something that I think most of us have heard about before. It has to do with goal setting, and we're talking about SMART goals, SMART, and I want to talk about them because it's a simple thing to talk about, but many times when we're doing goal setting, we don't really think about the SMART method, and it really is an effective method, and that's why I want to talk about it. And what brought this up was I was meeting with a leadership team member during our monthly meeting a few weeks ago, and I was asking them about their goals, and we were setting different goals for the next month. Okay, and we wanted to come up with something that got them back on track. And it's really interesting, that person was unable to really, at least initially, we talked it through and come up with a goal, but they were not initially able to come up with something that was specific, right, and measurable, and I'm gonna go through all the attainable, and it's got to be relevant, and it's got to be time-bound, all that, right? So I'm gonna go through that, but it's interesting how many people struggle with that. They really do, and they create these very broad, general goals that could never be achieved, right? Never be achieved. And so what they do is they set themselves up for failure where they can never actually hit those goals. And we see it a lot in the guild whenever we're doing hot seats. Jim and I are doing hot seats. And so it's something that it's not, this is not specific to, just lawyers or non-lawyers or, some people over other people. This is a very common thing. And so if you do struggle with this, don't worry, but it's a common thing that we see on a regular basis where people will say they want to do something. For example, I want to make $1 million, right? That's something we have heard before. And so maybe that's one of your goals. I mean, is that realistic? I mean, is that even one of those things that you could actually achieve? Okay. Maybe it is in a year or two, but is it achievable this year? I don't know. You know yourself way better than anybody else does. So it's one of those things that you have to think this through and don't just throw things out there because you saw it on X or on YouTube, right? You don't want to do that. You need to come up with things that fit within this mold. So let's get to it. Let's get to that anatomy of SMART goals. That way you can start to approach it. The S, and I think many people know what it is, but it is specific. All right. I want you to have a laser focus on this. It's specific. And it's interesting because if you think about this Albert Einstein quote, I don't know if you've heard it, but it's something along the lines of if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And it's really true. If you think about people that you're asking them about a specific topic, it's very, very easy to identify whenever someone doesn't know what they're talking about because they start talking about generalities. And it's the same thing when it comes to your goals. You got to be specific about them. And so if you can't make it specific, if you can't narrow it down, you don't really know what your goal is. So start with making it specific. Okay. Instead of saying something along the lines of that, I want to increase our average fee. Okay. Maybe say, I want to increase our average fee to $25,000, right? That is a very specific thing that you could do. M is for measurable, all right? And this is probably the one that people, they slip up on the most. They come up with a goal that you can't really measure, okay? And this is one where it can get frustrating, but people are like, oh, it's, numbers aren't everything. Well, they're not, but if you want to have a goal, you need to be able to measure it in some way, okay? So M is for measurable. And if you think about what Peter Drucker says about what gets measured gets managed, it's the same thing. And there is a study on this. I can't remember where I saw it, but it's about the people that write down their goals and they share them with someone, and they send them actually weekly updates on it. Or I think they send a weekly update to a friend. It's a 76% success rate compared to like a 43%, or it's something like that. Those numbers are very similar. But the point is that it's something that they're measuring and they're tracking on a regular basis. So being able to measure it and track it is really, really important. So tracking it, being able to measure it, and that's one of those things where I wish that it was actually measure and track, because it's kind of hard to do that whenever it comes to SMART goals. There's only so many letters in the word SMART, but if you think of not just measure, but measure and track, measuring it's one thing, but tracking it's another thing. And so if you can keep an eye on it. So let me give you an example of this. I go to the gym regularly and I get measured regularly, where they check my body fat percentage because I want to get down to a certain goal. And I'd say about 5 or 6 months ago, I had not been for a little bit, and I think it had been 4 months. I'd been tracking it for 4 months, and I went in, got measured, and lo and behold, I'd actually increased my body fat percentage by about 3%, which I was extremely frustrated by because I'd been working really hard on getting that down. And so now I've gotten back to measuring it every single month on a regular basis, tracking it. Right. So measure and track. It's really, really important. Measuring is one thing, but tracking is the other part of it. So when you think about this part of the goal, measure and track. Always be tracking it, whatever the goal is, on a regular basis. This is, I'd say, of the two, measuring it is, tracking is more important than the measuring part of it. You can't have one without the other, but the tracking of it, super important for it to actually be effective. All right, so let's talk about the A, and it's got to be achievable. There are so many people, what they do is they take and they set these goals that are just, there's no way they can achieve them, not one bit. And it's frustrating for them because they're not going to achieve their goal. No matter what they do, they can work super, super hard. And let's say that, and Jason Silks talked about this with me before, where let's say that you set a goal to earn, $5 million in a year. Okay, great. Wonderful goal. But the reality is that if it's not attainable, if it's not achievable, you may even get like $4 million, but you're still going to be disappointed, even though that might be double what you made the year before. Okay, so you've set yourself up for failure from the beginning, even though you've done a really good job, and you don't want to do that. And so make sure that you're setting these goals that you can actually hit. Really important. R, relevant. It needs to align with your mission. Don't forget about that, right? Make sure that all these goals, right? Every time you set these goals, daily goals, monthly goals, quarterly goals, all these need to be headed towards a certain direction. Make sure that they are matched up. Okay. You've got to know where you're going and make sure that these goals are relevant to what your long-term vision is. All right. And the last one, it's time bound. You remember the clock has got to be ticking on this. You've got to put some sort of deadline on this. Okay. Deadlines are the fuel for the fire on getting the goals achieved. Okay. And if you don't have this, if you don't have it set, it's just not going to happen for the most part. The studies don't lie. You are far more likely to achieve your goal if you've got a timeline on it. Really important. Set the deadline. You have to set yourself up to win. And if you don't do that by putting a deadline on it, your chances of success are limited. All right. That is all for this episode. Just as a reminder, if you have something you want me to cover on the Saturday show, just make sure that you shoot me a text, 314-501-9260, and I will do that. Until next time, though, remember that consistent action is the blueprint that turns your goals into reality. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Maximum Lawyer Podcast. To stay in contact with your host and to access more content, go to MaximumLawyer.com. Have a great week and catch you next time.